Viridian, The Green Guide, by Clouds. My head in the clouds not coming down. Read by Oakshadow 5. Chapter 62. Investigation. Summary. Information comes to light. Katsuki slouched up the stairs and knocked on the door as hard as he could. "Ogawa, you tentacle-haired bastard! You better be in there!" He might be getting better at this whole emotion thing, but Rary still felt a hell of a lot like anger, and Katsuki was ready to punch his friend's face in as soon as he opened the door. Except for the fact that he didn't. Instead, the door was opened by a woman who looked to be a few years older than Ogawa was, with long locks of grey hair that almost looked like dusty cobwebs. "What do you think you're doing, brat?" Katsuki looked her up and down. He knew he didn't have the address wrong, but Ogawa had mentioned that he lived with his deadbeat sister, so this must be her. "I'm looking for your stupid brother, not you. Is he home?" "Can't you just text him like a normal person, rather than showing up and pounding on my door in the middle of my nap?" she challenged. "You don't think I already tried that, dumbass?" Katsuki growled. "He's not answering, so why don't you go pull him out of his room so I can give him peace of my mind?" The sister, Arakune, if Katsuki remembered correctly, huffed. "Even if I was willing to do that, brat, he's not here." Katsuki felt his stomach drop slightly. "Well then, where the fuck is he?" Arakune shrugged. "Hell if I know. Haven't seen him in almost a week. He's probably out on a bender or something." "So, let me get this straight," Katsuki said quietly. "Your brother has been missing for a week, and you don't even care?" "Do I look like I care about what the brat does?" She rolled her eyes. "Go ask his friends or whatever, and get off my porch before I make you." Katsuki growled quietly as she slammed the door in his face. He had half a mind to blow it down and force her to talk to him, but it didn't seem like she had a lot of information anyway, so instead, he turned on his heel and stalked down the street. Where could Ogawa have gone? It just wasn't like him to disappear like this. Not that Katsuki had really known him that long, but still. Whatever, he should probably file a missing persons report or something, since the idiot's sister obviously didn't care enough to do it. Katsuki stopped walking as the thought processed. Ogawa was missing. No one knew where he was. He wasn't at home sick like he and the others had assumed. Something might have happened to him. He could be in danger. The realization made Katsuki sick, and it seemed like almost no time at all until he was kicking open the door to the police station. The cat-headed officer he'd seen on his last visit was sitting at the desk again, so Katsuki went right up to him. "Hey, Fairball, is Amplifier here?" The officer visibly bristled, his fur standing up on end, and Katsuki wondered if he should apologize. Probably, but right now he was too worried to do anything but find Amplifier, so he could get her to find Ogawa. "She's not here right now," a plain-looking detective said kindly, walking up to the desk. Katsuki paused for a moment. "What about the Razorhead? Is he around?" "It's the same issue," the detective pointed out. "They're both active at night, so they won't be on duty for another few hours. But maybe we can still help. I'm Detective Tsukauchi. It's nice to meet you." Katsuki eyed him suspiciously, then huffed. "Katsuki Bakugo?" He remembered Amplifier mentioning a Tsuki at the police station a couple times, so this must be him. Whatever. He'd have to be good enough. "Well, Bakugo," the detective smiled kindly and gestured for Katsuki to follow him back to his desk. "What can I help you with?" "One of the guys from Amplifier's redemption group is missing," Katsuki growled. "And you better do your job and find him." Tsukauchi blinked a couple times and sat down at his computer. "Name? Maybe there's already a case open." "Ogawa." Bakugo racked his brain. What was the guy's first name again? Aito Ogawa. He has a tentacle hair quirk. Tsukauchi typed a few things into his computer and frowned. "All right, he doesn't have a report open yet. What makes you so sure he's missing?" "He hasn't shown up to group or to the hangouts we planned," Katsuki said. "He's also not answering his stupid phone." "Okay." The detective typed a few things. "Have you checked at his home? Maybe his phone broke or something like that." "Where do you think I just came from?" Katsuki growled. "He lives with his good-for-nothing sister, but she hasn't seen him either, and apparently doesn't care." Tsukauchi asked him a few more questions. going over basic information such as when he last saw him, and who else might have any information on his whereabouts. And it was less than 20 minutes later that Katsuki was leaving the station and heading home. He wished he felt lighter or relieved or whatever, but he was just tired. Now that he'd done all he could, the anger that had been covering everything was slowly leaking out of him, and Katsuki just felt tired. Ogawa better be okay, because if he wasn't, Katsuki was gonna kill him. You should drink some water. Ogawa glared at Kumo through the bars, then went back to covering his eyes with his arm. Somehow, I don't think that's gonna help. His entire body felt like it was being torn apart from the inside. He'd only had a few sessions with the doctor so far, but every visit to the lab seemed worse than the last, which didn't bode well for anything going forward. The doctor, who Ogawa was 100% convinced was completely off his rocker, rambled proudly during their experiments about how his body was taking the modifications well, whatever that meant, and would soon be ready for the other quirks, which was both impossible and terrifying. All he knew was that after the experiments, he would wake up back in his cell hours or even days later, depending on how long whatever drugs they'd used on him that time took to wear off. It was exhausting. Did you see that other guy again today? The big one? Kumo asked. Do you know whether they'd bring him to the cells at all? He groaned and rolled onto his side so he could see his cellmate. The doctor said something about him being expendable. I don't know, but I think they're rushing the process with him or something. The other guy had only been in the lab for Ogawa's last 2 sessions, and at first he could have sworn he was Endeavor, but finally decided it must just be some look-alike. He'd asked Kumo if he'd seen him before, but he was just as confused as he was. They couldn't really afford to offer the mystery experiment any more than passing curiosity, however, considering that they had to focus on staying alive, and maybe even fighting a way out of there if they could. In a place like this, it was unfortunately every man for himself. I wonder what they're gonna use him for. Kumo spoke with a detachment that only came from being in his place way too long. They never tell me. The ones they finish with just disappear. Well, that's comforting, Ogawa deadpanned. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna take another nap. Izuku had spent the past few days obsessively looking up everything he could about Endeavor. It wasn't as if he didn't already have more than passing knowledge. He couldn't have been able to call himself a hero fanboy if he didn't know a lot of trivia on every one of the top 10 heroes, but Endeavor had never particularly been one of his favorites. He'd been too focused on All Might to really pay Endeavor much mind, but there was no lack of information out there once he went digging. The first surprise had been discovering more about his family. He had 3 living children, and Izuku winced when he realized that his disastrous encounter at New Year's had sparked a rumor that the hero was actually abusive. He hadn't wanted to cause any trouble for the family, but it seemed that's what he'd done. There was nothing that he could do about that now, however, so maybe finding him would count as a good enough apology to the family. Mostly Izuku was looking at the hero's habits and social connections for any clue as to where he could have disappeared to, in the case that he hadn't been kidnapped by the villain factory. But one section on his notebook seemed to burn on his mind, even though that notebook was currently closed and hidden deep under his mattress. He hated himself for it, but he couldn't afford not to keep a list of Endeavor's weaknesses, just in case it was the villain factory. He'd ended up having a nightmare about it last night. He'd been back at the bar from New Year's, fire racing toward him as Endeavor glared at him. For some reason, he'd had his notebook in his hand, but his list hadn't been enough. The flames had just devoured the book, and Izuku had woken up in a cold sweat, slapping at his blankets in a desperate attempt to put out the imaginary fire that was threatening to burn him alive. He hadn't been able to sleep after that. Izuku sighed as he smelled Mom making breakfast. He spent all night researching. Again. He really needed to stop doing that when he was stressed, but the thought of Endeavor coming back as a berserker, or worse, with multiple quirks, was too... He just hoped that Eraser and the detectives on the case would be able to find him before the news broke and they could avoid all of the drama and negative publicity. There wasn't even a guarantee that the villain factory had taken him. It was just a hunch anyway. Everything was going to be fine. He stood and stretched, ready to go join Mom for breakfast when he heard a loud gasp. Izuku, get in here! Izuku panicked and tore the door of his room open, racing down the hall and almost falling as he slid into the living room. What is it? What's wrong? Mom was staring frozen at the TV. I know you keep up with all the heroes and... What could have happened? Izuku wrinkled his nose in confusion and turned to the screen, his heart sinking as he saw the headlines. Popularity has gone down significantly since the New Year's disaster. Izuku vaguely recognized the reporter, although he couldn't tell if he recognized her from the news or if he'd saved her at some point. Since then, many have brought up his history of violence, and there have even been petitions making their way around social media sites to insist that the police investigate the family for abuse, mostly citing the institutionalization of Ray Todoroki, Endeavor's wife, in the wake of a mental breakdown nearly a decade ago, as well as the tragic death of their oldest son in a training accident. It has been widely speculated that Endeavor will lose the coveted number 2 spot at the next JP Billboard ranking, so it remains to be seen whether this disappearance is legitimate or if it is a ploy by his publicity team to make him seem more sympathetic in an attempt to keep his current rating. What do you think? Is this a publicity ploy, a family snapping after a lifetime of abuse, or a villain at work? We'll have to see as the story unfolds. Hina Yu, signing off. How could the number 2 hero just have disappeared? Mom sounded worried, but she didn't even know the half of it. The police don't even have any idea where he could be. Well, Izuku knew that wasn't entirely true, but it was probably best if the media didn't know the biggest lead on the case was human experimentation. Well, actually, the vultures would probably love it, but the general public wouldn't think it was very reassuring. They really needed to figure out this case quickly. Izuku didn't want to have to use his list. Oh, the media found out that Endeavor is missing, and we got the confirmation that he's in the villain factory. Anyways, guys, I hope you all enjoyed chapter 62 of Viridian the Green Guide, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!